So many people are out here on the internet talking about their data experiences at FAANG companies. How to get a FAANG job, day in the life of a FAANG data person, what I learned inside a FAANG company, what I didn't learn inside a FAANG company, etc., etc., etc. The thing is, although it might not seem like it on the internet, most of the data work in the world actually happens outside of FAANG companies. I personally have had a long data career, and would you believe it, I have never worked at a FAANG company. Now, don't get me wrong, they're not bad companies, and they pay well. It's understandable why people are interested in learning about them. They've also had a lot to do with many advancements in data. So there is nothing bad about FAANG companies. But there is more to the world of data than FAANG companies. So in this video, I thought I would share the story of my non-FAANG data career. And I'm also a bit older than most of the creators who make these kinds of videos. So you'll be able to see how some of my early decisions ended up playing out many years later. And to do this video, I'm just going to go through my LinkedIn profile. So here you go. Job number 1, publisher. Actually, this is more job number 0, publisher at the Comical Magazine. I was going to school in New York. A friend of mine was a stand-up comedian, and we were sitting on a stoop one day, just throwing out ideas. And he said, why don't we start a comedy magazine for comedy clubs that's like a playbill, where if you go to the theater, they give you like a little program and it's got stuff in it. Why don't we do that for comedy clubs and we can sell advertising? And I was like, I wonder how much would it cost to print something like this? And so we went and we found out how much it cost to print, and it wasn't that expensive. And we were like, yeah, we could probably sell ads to cover this. So we started that business. It was fun and also somewhat challenging to start a physical magazine just as internet comedy was blowing up. But it was fun. It was a college experience. I loved it. But that's sort of job number 0. All right, job number 1, post-graduation, which I don't share too much about, is this company that I was at for a little under a year called MBI. And MBI was a super interesting like collectibles company. And they did mostly direct mail. And I was an assistant product manager. And by the way, I studied operations research in school, which is like statistics for business for people who might not be aware of what operations research is. But when I graduated back in 2006, there really weren't data jobs in the way that there are data jobs now. And so I, like many early data science type of people, kind of found my way into it when it was a combination of multiple skills that came together, and you'll see how that played out. So I was there for a little under a year. Other famous MBI alums include Andy Jassy, who is the CEO of Amazon now, which is kind of crazy. And it was an interesting job. It was not a great fit for me, frankly. It was a lot of like repetitive tasks and paperwork and just like managing direct mail campaigns. And I wasn't great at it, and I didn't like it. And all my friends back then had finance jobs, and I thought that a finance job was going to be better than continuing where I was. And so I left. And it's funny, at my next job, I ended up taking this personality test. And one of the things that came out of the test as like the things that are going to be most challenging for me was like paperwork and admin tasks. And I was like, oh my God, that was literally my entire last job. It's no surprise that it was so challenging. I was like, just can you create a job that's all the stuff that is bad for you? But it was super interesting. Like, the company is a great company. People were great. Just wasn't a great fit. So I moved on to next join this company called Wall Street Access. And I was there for just a little under 4 years. I started as an analyst. I ended as a vice president. And this was a VP in finance, which is different than like typical corporate VP. So it's a little more junior, just to set the stage. But it was amazing, like amazing company, amazing people. And I was a securities analyst pretty much at the beginning. Although I would say I did like a whole bunch of random operational type of analyst work. Wall Street Access is like a holding company that had multiple different financial businesses. It was started by this great entrepreneurial guy. His name is Dennis Kelleher, and he was an immigrant from Ireland, and he worked his way up in a major investment bank, and he ended up starting one of the first discount brokerage companies. And he was in his 70s when I joined, but he was still very active in the business. And I started as an analyst in one of the divisions, and then very quickly moved to be an analyst essentially for the management team. And that's what helped me move up pretty quickly there. Super, super interesting job. And yeah, for anybody that is a data person that is wondering whether like financial analysis type jobs are fun or worthwhile, they definitely are, because one of the benefits of working in finance is that you deeply understand a lot of the core levers that drive value inside of a company. And ultimately, that's what every business is trying to optimize for, the value of the overall company. And so understanding that and getting some of those experiences early was really helpful. I got really into tech at that point. So at that point, I wouldn't even have considered myself a data person, even though I spent 90% of my time in Excel and writing macros and doing some random scripting. This was even before Python took over as the scripting language in data. And so I was like scripting in random languages like Ruby or Bash. I did a lot of Bash scripts back then. And so I was there for a long time. I felt that I wanted to move into tech from finance. And this was at the beginning of like the Web 2.0 era. There were a whole bunch of new businesses that were getting created around different APIs. If I had been a couple years later, I probably would have moved more into fintech instead of pure tech, but back then there really weren't that many companies that were trying to combine the finance and technology and startups. I would say 3 years after this, by 2015 or so, there were. But I left to go. So I wanted to go into tech. I thought all the cool things that were going to get built in my lifetime were going to be more focused on technology. I understood the finance side of business and the strategy side. Not that you ever fully understand that, but I had good training there. Took and passed the CFA exams and the CAIA exams. And it's like I had done a lot of work there, and I felt like if I could get some technical experience also, that I would be in the best place for whatever I wanted to do in the future. So I started a company. I got this memoir from my great grandfather that was very meaningful. And it was like an audio memoir. And this was right back as the Twilio APIs were getting popular. And so I built a company called Memoir Place. And I guess to a certain, I mean, there wasn't that much of a data company, but the idea was that you could have a phone conversation with a relative that was older who you wanted to preserve their stories for future generations in sort of a memoir. And that conversation would get recorded automatically, and it would get transcribed, and you could turn it into a book or just have it as audio or whatever you wanted to do with sort of a memoir creation product. And I taught myself web programming, and I built it. And the business side did not work out. And I got engaged, and I was building that, living with my parents in the basement, essentially. And my wife was my fiance was back in New York. And I said, all right, I need to go and put this on pause and get a job. And I thought, all right, I had this finance experience. Let me go learn the tech side from a really great team. And so I joined Paperless Post, which is a startup in New York, great company. And they had a really strong technology team, some leaders that I deeply respected that were doing a lot in the open source community, and were just very heavily involved doing great technical work. And I thought, okay, I had this finance and strategy experience. Let me get the tech experience. And then I don't know what I want to do in the long run, but if I've got both of those, there's a lot that I could do. So I started a Paperless Post as an engineer, and pretty quickly started to be sort of like the data engineer because I like to joke I was like the only engineer that understood what revenue meant. And that wasn't really true. Other people knew what revenue meant. But like when I was talking to the business folks, the chief operating officer, or other people in the company, I deeply understood what they needed on the business side and what kind of business metrics they were looking for. Because until just recently, I was them on the other side looking at analyzing businesses and understanding what was going to move the needle and help those businesses become successful. So I was best situated on the engineering team to do that work. And then this was right when like the HBR article about data science came out, and there were all of these questions about, okay, so we're a small but quickly growing startup. How do we implement a data strategy? Like, what should our data strategy look like? And so I raised my hand and I said, well, I'm kind of doing this job a little bit already, but I think we should make it more official and let me go and start the data team. And that's what we did. And I started the data team. I built up all of the initial data infrastructure and data warehouse. And this was like when Redshift came out, we moved everything to Redshift. So we built out our whole data infrastructure. It was super fun. I got fired after a couple years in a story that I'll share in a different video, but I was there for a while. Super great experience. And I left. So when I left Paperless Post, I went on to a company called Bionic. And actually, I know this is a video about my non-FAANG data career, but this was the only point in time where I thought I might end up at a FAANG company. I was out interviewing, and the two jobs that were like the finalists for me in sort of, I don't know, I'm sure many people here have gone through the process of getting a job. So the way I did it was you sort of load up at the beginning of the pipeline with like a whole bunch of companies, and then you interview and it comes down, and it was down to two, Facebook and Bionic. I wasn't sure which one I was going to pick, but I didn't end up getting the Facebook job. And so I chose Bionic, which was the final one that I ended up through the process. And it was a great experience. Bionic was a company that was sort of early on in the venture innovation space. And the idea is that it was a bunch of startup technology type people, and we would go into really big companies who had amazing distribution, right? The joke is that it's a race between startups to build distribution or big companies to build a product, because that's the biggest challenge for big companies, but they have amazing distribution. And so I was at Bionic. I was sort of like, they had a number of people there that were generalist business builders, and I was sort of focused on the data side of that and a little bit on the finance side. So it was, what are some interesting data opportunities that companies are exploring? And then Bionic, we would go in and we would help them understand the market. We would help them validate the idea. We'd help them understand more about how to build it. And there was a lot of work that we did to try to take the benefits of a big company, but a little bit of the mindset of startup building things quickly. And I was at Bionic for about 18 months. It was a great experience, like amazingly talented people. Bionic subsequently got bought by Accenture. And yeah, super amazing team, like very high caliber, talented team. And after a little while, though, I was more interested in being more involved in the like real operational side of the business. One of the challenges of consulting is that like you don't have as much of a stake in the long run. And so there were some things, like there were some ideas that we had that were just like, I thought amazing and like clearly, billion-dollar companies that we didn't end up launching. And I was just like, all right, I want to be in a place where I can make some of those decisions about if this is a worthwhile idea, let's do it. And if not, let's not. But at least I would be a little bit more in the business. And so my next company that I joined was Nielsen. And I was at Nielsen for about 4.5 years. I started as a director. I ended up as a VP, as like a real VP. My journey at Nielsen over that time was very interesting. And yeah, I mean, I started and within sort of 6 or 8 months ended up like owning the P&L of a reasonably sized data business in the sports sponsorship space. And it was really an amazing experience. You know, I learned so much. And I learned a lot about what it means to actually run a data business. One of the things actually I think that over the next 10 years is going to be a theme in the world of data is that we have done an okay job of like launching many data products, like many companies have launched data products. I think we do not, as an industry, yet appreciate what it means to maintain and grow those data products over time. And there's a whole bunch of things on the operations side, on change management, and just like that's a really interesting and challenging part of data work that I didn't get a lot of exposure to. A good chunk of what I was responsible for in that job was transforming the business using like, it's funny, like AI and machine learning, because everybody says it, but like what we generated the world's premier data set on sports sponsorship. So we analyzed essentially every second of professional sports that appear globally. And in each second, we're looking for what brands are on the screen that are sponsoring that broadcast. And then we had a methodology where we were able to take the value of that exposure that you were getting to the same fan base and then put a sort of advertising equivalent value on it compared to what you would have had to spend on commercial time to get access to that same audience. And it was really challenging from the technology side, as you can imagine. We started off with the work being done mostly manually, second by second, drawing boxes around logos. And then in the end, we had computer vision systems that were trained in a very detailed way per league, per team, per season. And it gets very tricky. One of the things, again, that I think people don't realize when they build proof of concepts for products like this that are very straightforward to build is that your proof of concept that is 95% accurate and 5% delivers garbage data isn't sufficient to power the type of product that customers actually need if they're going to rely on that to spend billions of dollars on. And so the level of accuracy, the level of manual QA that needs to go into this is way more than I think most people understand. Super interesting experience. We also did a lot of transformation on the front end. We went from having essentially no portal and all of our data delivered in PowerPoint presentations to getting our data inside customer-facing front ends. As you can imagine, my love for customer-facing front ends has continued to my current job, which we can get to in just a minute. After about 4.5 years, I left Nielsen and I joined a data startup as the VP of data strategy, and the company's called Helium 10. They do data for the e-commerce industry, e-commerce sellers. Like, amazing company again. They're essentially SEO and SEM for Amazon and Walmart. So if you can imagine that in Google, it's very valuable to show up organically in search terms because then people click on you. And it's also very valuable to get the right intelligence when you are buying advertising. That same SEO and SEM in Google exists in the Amazon ecosystem, where if you sell products, it is extremely financially beneficial for you to come up high in the organic search results. And it is also very important for you to buy advertising and to advertise efficiently and correctly. And so Helium 10, along with a number of other tools to help Amazon and Walmart sellers, is a major player in that market. And it was a great experience coming in, and I got to lead sort of like a wider data team than when I was at Nielsen, where I had product and data, but there were engineering pieces that were sort of matrixed away in a different engineering team. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I ended up leaving when the company restructured, and sort of where I sat didn't make sense anymore for me to be in a role like that. And so I left, and I ended up deciding to start Delivery Layer, which some of you know about, some of you don't know about. Delivery Layer is a customer-facing data product where we build customer-facing data applications that will deliver your internal data externally. So if you're a data business and you need a front end insights platform to sell, if you have a construction data set and you want to sell to all of the VPs of strategy and executives at construction companies, and they need a dashboard and a website and all of that to be able to log into, that is what we build. It comes with APIs. And we've got this really interesting pricing model. We build the application for free. It just takes a couple weeks. And then you get charged like a maintenance, essentially. So as opposed to most software applications, you pay a lot up front and then you still have to pay maintenance. We're sort of like, you just start with the maintenance, and it's smaller than typical maintenance for these applications. So that's Delivery Layer. And Delivery Layer is what led me to You Find People, because my marketing strategy for Delivery Layer was, let me go and talk about my data experiences on the internet, and some small percentage of the data people that are exposed to me will have an application that they need to build where somebody in the business says, hey, we need these Tableau dashboards are great, but we want to have our customers start to access our data. How do we do that? And we need to have complex permissioning, and certain people and teams can access certain things and not, and we need APIs and all that. And so I was like, let me just talk about my data experience. There aren't that many people who have led 100-person data teams and hundreds of data people and been responsible for real P&Ls of data businesses. So if I share my experiences online, then I should be able to grow a little bit of an audience, and then some small percentage of those people will come and have a problem that Delivery Layer could solve, and that if they like what I have to say and they agree with the way that I approach data, then I would have a decent chance at those projects, because the product is really good. And so if they come in, then it'll all work out. And that's what led me to start creating content. And then that content creation led to the final piece in my non-FAANG data career, which is where I decided to launch a professional development program for data people, which is this top data people site where I've essentially, one of the things that I found limiting, and I was doing YouTube videos a little bit, and I was doing a lot on LinkedIn. And I felt like I started working on this idea of a curriculum. What does top data work look like? I've seen across a number of different companies, I've seen hundreds of data people, what works, what doesn't, what do the best do that makes them so effective. So I started writing that out, and it was just really long. I was originally going to do it as a course, and then it was just way too long for a course. It ended up being kind of 5 courses. And so I thought, all right, instead of one big course where you'd have to spend 2 days binging it and you forget everything, what if instead we do a video a week over 6 months with some coaching calls in the middle to help people ask questions on how to apply some of the lessons to situations that they're dealing with or challenges that they're working through, and then have a little community of people who are all helping each other to develop. And that's what this came up with. It's still sort of part of my marketing strategy for Delivery Layer, and it's been an interesting journey sort of putting this out. I've really enjoyed it so far. We'll see, we're only a couple months in as of the filming of this in late August 2024. But yeah, it's been super fun, and I think that we'll see how it plays out. It's one of the benefits of being a bootstrap company instead of having raised VC money is I can do fun little experiments like this, such as having my marketing strategy be launching a professional development program. All right. So that's it. That is my non-FAANG data career. It's had some fun and exciting twists and turns. There were some amazing moments and some really challenging moments. We haven't gone through them all. I was leading on the leadership team of a sports business during COVID when sports were not happening. You can imagine there were many tough times, but it's been great. I've really been happy with my non-FAANG data career. I'm actually really glad that back when I was up for that Facebook job that I didn't get it, because one of the downsides of working at FAANG companies is that they like hire people at levels below kind of where they would be. So if you were a director or a VP somewhere where you managed a reasonably sized team, they'll pay you a lot, but they're going to put you in as a manager. And even now, like my understanding, and I haven't worked inside big companies, is that even as like someone who's managed over 100 people teams, I'd still just come in as a director. So one of the benefits that I got by not ending up there is I got to have this really big business scope that I was responsible for. And I have just really gotten to learn a lot by being exposed and pushed to do a good job when I had a lot of business results on the line. So anyways, this is my message to everybody out there. I couldn't have predicted my career because back when I started, data as it is right now didn't exist. And so for you, don't worry too much about whether you get a FAANG job or another job or whatever. Like your career is going to be long. Keep focusing on getting better, having fun, finding interesting things to do. One thing I think I did really right in my career is that I always found interesting things to do with good people. And that has mattered so much more than like the name brand. All right, that's it.